All right, so everyone, welcome to our invited discussion on digital studio experience courses. As you've seen, as you've been coming in and I just said, please feel free to use the chat panel or just speak out. You can raise your hand if you're familiar with doing that using the participants panel in Zoom. And I think that's where the raise your hand is, right? And raise your hand there. All right, we'll go right on ahead. So welcome again. I'm going to give a very quick, brief overview of what we're going to be doing today. We have four main goals. One is to share the rationale for these discussions, then briefly do introductions. We have some invited panelists with us today who will share their experiences. We've given them some questions in advance. And let them speak about their experiences during this period of remote emergency instruction and what we've learned from that. And then finally, we'll open up the discussion to everyone here to participate and share experience and share what we need. Oh, we only have one? Okay, sounds good. We have one of our panelists here. Sounds good. Maybe the other panelists will join us as time goes on. All right, so introductions, rationale. I'm skipping ahead too fast. So Provost Croson has asked the Center for Educational Innovation to convene these discussions with two purposes in mind. The first of those is to share experiences so that we can learn from one another. And then second is to identify what support is needed to conduct these courses in the summer and perhaps even beyond, since we still do not know what the future holds for fall. We'll be creating notes from these discussions is being recorded. And so this recording, we're going to use that to create notes, which we will share with the Provost, Regents, and also with Center for Educational Innovation. On our CEI website. Sorry, I heard some feedback there. All right. So introductions, my name is Alyssa Bonak and I'll be facilitating this discussion today. Our chat monitor is Anita Gonzalez. Lauren Marsh is with us today from ATSS as our academic technologist. Deborah Olton is our librarian, and Deborah, correct me, you are the librarian for architecture and design, is that correct? Do we lose Deborah?
Yes, I am theater and dance,
okay.
Art history, fine art, architecture, and landscape architecture.
Thank you.
Yes.
And then our panelists today are Luke Granholm from Morris and Technical Theater, and Mike Christensen is here from architecture. And I think has Abby arrived? I think not yet. So we'll see if Abby is able to join us in a little bit. Observing us today from CEI is JD Walker. He's also going to be just taking some notes and sitting back and watching us. And then our official note taker is Mary Jetter. So that's our team supporting us in getting all these materials to the Provost and the Regents, and then again on our website. So moving ahead, our panelists today are Luke Granholm from Morris, Mike Christensen from architecture, and we'll see if Abby joins us. But the way we would like to do this is, I think Luke and Mike, we've sent you some questions in advance, and I'm just going to give you about 3 to 5 minutes each just to share your thoughts. So what's been working for you? What has been really challenging about this experience? And so if you don't mind, Lucas, I'd like you to start. Is that all right?
That's totally fine.
And I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen so that everyone can see you speaking
Great.
Easily. So.
And everyone can hear me fine? Is that all right? All right, good. All right. Yeah, well, thank you, Alyssa. My name is Lucas Granholm. I'm an assistant professor of theater arts at the Morris campus, and my specialty is in theater design and the application of theater design as well, lighting design, set design, costumes, etc. And so when we shifted to this, let me close. When we shifted to this E-learning, I started quickly to adopt the mentality and conveyed this to our students as quickly as possible, adopting the mentality of doing the best we can with what we can, where we can. And pivoting these challenges into opportunities to see how they can find their way they work as an artist. I'm finding it hard students are finding it hard to find creative drive, I think, at times, because they lack the studio space. A lot of them are either, in their childhood bedrooms or on campus still, but they don't have access to kind of the structure of a studio space to create. And also finding times to getting them to have the drive to do things. But ultimately, a lot of my coursework has been centered around visual research and communicating things and communicating design intent through visuals. And that's been through a lot of open source software. The easiest things to kind of move online I found are, I'm currently teaching a sound design course where students are using an open source design software that they can do edits and things like that quite simply. We're coming in with the issue with that is students possibly not having access to technology that they need to support this. So microphones, even on computers that can handle the software, but they're still finding ways to get around that through different open source audio libraries. Like the BBC has a great archive for sound design, as well as like thousands of other websites as well. They're royalty-free sounds for that. Overall, though, my courses, we've been working kind of virtually through Google Drive and Zoom conversations where students and I are communicating through that kind of method. The hardest things, though, is students finding software or working with software on their own computers can sometimes be challenging. Now, it's, for the most part, students aren't having trouble, but sometimes there might be a computer glitch or something like that, and it's really hard for me to communicate with them. We try and do some screen shares and things like that. I also do demos and record my demos and post them to the students as well. But the the studio time where actually the students are playing with, say, the design software and things like that, that's kind of lacking. I'm finding that the best way to do that is I have all the students working on their projects. We're all on Zoom at the same time, and they just pipe up when they have questions or things like that, because the immediacy of them asking questions about the software or whatever program we're using is still kind of there, which has been helpful. The one thing I'm finding that we're kind of just missing is just the tactile nature of the work. While a lot of the work I do is digital, using drafting software and design software like Google SketchUp, AutoCAD, Vectorworks, as well as some different theater visualization softwares, we're missing kind of the key element of play, which is a big part of creating. And the kind of structure of studio time, especially for students that are young artists, need that kind of structure and that rigorous environment to work and create in, as well as kind of the social aspect of bouncing ideas off of each other can be kind of difficult. So what I've been trying to do is I do as much live lecturing as I possibly can so they can work with me and ask questions as we go. But I'm finding that, at least in the theater world, especially the design world, a lot of softwares, open source softwares, or companies are opening up their licenses for free during this time. Virtual theater, which is one that also is allowing students free work, and Vectorworks and AutoCAD, as long as students have a .edu license or email address, they can access that stuff for free. Does anyone have any questions for me on that at all?
I think given the number of people we have, I think that's a great way to handle this. So if you have an immediate question for Luke right now, feel free to pop it in the chat or ask right away, or we can hold it until later on. if you have a
I have a
question.
question, Luke,
Mhm.
just from the library side. I'm
Mhm.
wondering, when you said you typically use a lot of content online for visuals,
Mhm.
can you just tell me what you use?
Oftentimes, it'll be various either PowerPoint presentations that I've used in the past, or most of what I'm using for visuals is students uploading images or scans of their work, and then we kind of have then we have group discussions about the students' work on Zoom, and we do it in tandem with Drive. It's not as much about as me sharing content as more of them sharing content that they've created with me.
Got it. Okay, that's a big difference. Good to know.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other quick questions before we move on to Mike? It's hard to read the faces. That's the thing about Zoom, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess we can put a pin in it and circle back.
Yep, exactly. We will come back to that. So I'm going to really quickly, thank you so much, Luke.
Oh, thank you.
And more later, I would say. All right, so now we will ask Mike Christensen from Architecture to share his experiences. So Mike, if you're ready, you can go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you take center stage.
All right, thanks, Alyssa. I will go ahead, if I may, and share my own screen. I'm just going to drop a few images in. So can you see that all right? You should see a picture on your screen. Has everyone got it?
Yes, thumbs up.
Okay. All right. So again, thank you. My name is Mike Christensen. I'm a professor of architecture and the director of graduate studies for the School of Architecture here at Twin Cities. Want to talk today specifically about the architecture studio course, which is really the core of our curriculum in our degree programs. And the studio in architecture, it's generally groups of 9 to 12, maybe as many as 15 students who convene for 4-hour periods on 3 afternoons a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, typically. And students are working throughout the semester on 1 or 2 projects that are related to some aspect of architecture, urban design. Projects range from abstract to foundational to theoretically driven to experimental, practical, technical, sometimes paralleling the ways that clients design or commission architects, but not always. The class meetings are usually I'd say of 2 different kinds. They're either sort of small group critique, or they're a larger audience review or discussion like you see on the screen here. Just page through a few more of my images, if I may. So we see some of these kind of smaller meetings in context. Students build a lot of models typically as part of the class. I would say that one of the hardest things about trying to do this sort of thing online is the notion of serendipity of learning. So much of what goes on in the studio has to do with the overheard conversation when discussions are in progress, things that people pick up just by hearing what's going on around them and in the environment. Of course, as I'm showing here, and Luke also mentioned this, the tactility, the notion of the construction and handling of physical models and drawings. Another one that's a bit tricky is this notion of exchanging projects with each other, which is something that I and a couple of colleagues do, is have students exchange their work with each other during the term. One of the things I think that's easier to do online, frankly, than without online is the ability for the students to share their work with a larger audience. So, you know, like we're doing now, and we can have Twin Cities and Morris, and we could have Duluth or New York or Paris, right? And we could all be in the audience together more or less in real time. So expansion is key. The idea of directly annotating on students' work, I think I can do it here. I can draw on my screen. I think you can see that. I'm not really trying to, you know, make any notes on the students' work. This isn't my comment. It's not my editorial comment. I'm just demonstrating that it actually is a very useful tool in that sense, using Zoom. Discussing the projects, direct annotating, I would say those are examples of things that are traditionally very core issues to us in our pedagogy, right? The discussion, the drawing on the student's work as a form of communication. And so finding ways to shift those core pedagogical concepts into online, I think some things can work really well. Luke mentioned Zoom, Google Drive, of course, as tools that are useful for us. We do a lot of digital work, of course. I'm showing some of the digital work on the screen. But we're also very interested in blending or crossing between media. So what you're seeing here on the screen is a project where the students build a digital model of the mess that's on their desk. So what you see on the top is like the actual photographs of the student's desk, and what you see on the bottom is a digital model that the student has constructed of the mess on their desk. So combining things that they're doing in one sort of mode to another. Of course, study abroad becomes an important piece of architectural education. All of these things roll together, and I think that if I had to, I'd certainly agree with Luke that the social and tactile aspects of learning are maybe in some ways at risk. I would add to that one of the things I feel as a concern about online teaching for architects in particular is the inability, or at least to me, the apparent inability to engage learning within a variety of spatial environments. And by which I mean, when I'm in the place with the students, I can say, hey, everyone look around and see, what other architects have done, or understand how this space is sort of set up. And we can have that in common. Whereas right now I can say something about Lucas's decor on, behind his head, he's got something on the wall, but I can't really talk about the space that he's in. I can't tell. I mean, maybe there's ways that we can move our screens around and get a better sense of space, but it's, in some ways, it's very difficult. And I think that also this notion of the overheard conversation becomes problematic as a loss. I'll leave it there. Happy to talk more.
Excellent. Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to add to Mike saying, yeah, the idea of scale, I think, is a huge part of it. Just going off of it is me saying, well, let's make something this on a screen. Students start to lose sight of scale when we do a lot of drafting and things like that. I can say something's 8 feet by 4 feet, but that doesn't really mean anything unless you're visually seeing it.
Great. Yes, the idea of serendipity, social connection, I think these are challenges many classes are having, but you've both pointed out some specific challenges, I think, about the tactile nature of your work and overcoming that. So right now I'm actually going to share my screen again to get us back to our agenda. Hold on one second. Okay, I think Abby is not going to be able to join us. Can you all see my screen now? Yes, great, thanks Anita, I can see you nodding. So we'll open up right now this to everyone here. I think there are 15 of us here to this discussion. So what do you need to teach your course online? What are you concerned about in teaching your course online? And what do you need to let go of to teach your course online? So I think, Lucas, at the beginning, you said something, let me see, what did I write down? That do what we can where we can. So that's kind of capturing that idea of letting go of something to be able to teach your course online. So I'm gonna open that up to everyone. Oops, you can still see, I think. Sorry, my screen got all messed up. So feel free to chime in with your thoughts on that, again, in the chat window or just by speaking out.
Well, I guess I can say a couple more things on this. I talked a little bit about concerns that I have teaching online, but one of the things I feel like I need in order to sort of teach effectively, although I realize that I may also just be talking about things that I'm used to doing and things that, the way that I was taught, right, last century, and you know how I perpetuate old habits. But it seems to me like something that's really missing, and that I'd love to be able to get a better handle on, is just this the notion of let's say multiple modes of representation. So that right now, even if I have the students doing drawings or building physical models, ultimately it gets facilitated through the screen. And what I'd love to be able to do is to find ways, right, multiple ways in which we could continue to share without necessarily implicating the screen. And so I'm not proposing necessarily that we all have to get together in the same space to do this, but surely there are other ways that we can, you know, that we can work. Maybe there's like we resurrect the idea of postal correspondence chess or something, right? We start mailing things back and forth to each other as snail mail. Or we've talked a lot about kits that the students in some way actually physically exchange things. It's not in real time, but maybe it's important to pursue those multiple modes of representation and work. I'd love to find that, because I do think it's necessary as a component of online teaching, or more broadly, alternative delivery methods.
Yeah, and to add to that, Mike, a lot of it comes down to, I've been experimenting with uploading CAD models into VR glasses and things like that, so students can have some experiential kind of learning with it. But then it goes into resources. That's just a big part of it, is trying to figure out how can we share resources enough, and mailing kits, which is something I've definitely done as well.
Hi, this is Mary. I'm just going to jump in and put a plug in. So tomorrow we have another one of these sessions focusing on tactile studios, and one of the panelists is Neil Anderson from horticulture here on the Twin Cities campus. And he took a few years ago his floral design class and moved that into an online class. And part of that was creating kits that the students had to get so that they could do the floral design. So that's tomorrow afternoon, if that's something that interests. And Neil has some great things to say about his experience with that.
Sure. Good. Yeah, I think. Sorry. Go.
Okay. I think one of the things that I've had to let go of, just real quick, in terms of teaching online, is I teach one large stagecraft course, which is about 20 students. And so we've turned that into a project-based course, but a lot of it is non-majors, things like that. And the students' kind of knee-jerk reaction for a lot of these is they turn their microphones off and their cameras off. So, which also, you know, I understand maybe some students don't want to expose their living space, things like that. But a lot of times I feel like I'm doing a radio show now when I do lectures, because I'm just talking in a room to just names on screens. So it gets the reactionary quality of teaching with students you have to kind of let go of in certain ways, especially with large groups.
Sure. I think, Phil, did you want to say something? I thought I saw you kind of leaning into your computer.
Yeah, I was just going to see if I could share. There's a couple of software that I've been using to help. I think you've been mentioning, like, you know, being on a radio. I find just staring into the screen, it's just not normal. Normally you'd be walking around, you'd draw on the whiteboard, or you'd move around, and students wouldn't necessarily be staring at your face for an hour, or in the case of a studio for 4 hours. That would be awkward. But I don't know if it's okay if I share my screen.
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead, Phil. That would be great. Thank you.
You cannot start sharing while other participant is sharing. Oh, okay. So you'd have to.
Sorry, I'll stop.
Let's see. So I have I've downloaded bought a camera. It's a Wise Cam. It's a $20 camera. And it's like a security camera. It's wireless. And so once it's connected and powered up, it's just broadcasting live. And so your phone, you can check on, you know, who's at the back door, who's at the front door, so to speak. But since it's broadcasting live, any device that can access the internet can access the camera. And so I am using a software, it's an emulator. This is BlueStacks. And so this is broadcasting the camera. So if I wanted to draw, I could draw and do that live. If I wanted to kind of get away from digital tools and just draw by hand. I'm also using my digital camera as the webcam, so I can look straight into the webcam, talk to the students specifically. But I could also use this software that allows me to use the webcam. It's called sparklecam. It lets me do a picture-in-picture, so I can take the video camera and the laptop camera and have another source. So if I wanted to model something, cut something up, you know, if I'm assembling it, I could bring it over to the video camera that's broadcasting the whiteboard. Just a way to have sort of multi-modes of interaction. So it's not just me talking to the students all the time. I could show or demonstrate things with my hands. I could demonstrate things with drawings if I wanted to. I just think that if we can kind of get away from just talking to one camera, it might feel a little bit more natural. That's my thoughts.
Great. So Deborah is actually asking, where did you learn about this? This technique and using these tools?
Well, I know that you can connect your digital camera to a computer via USB. So if you wanted to have your, you know, higher end digital camera, all of the people who do tutorials online, the most successful ones, they use a better camera than the webcam on a laptop. And then you can control the depth of field. So the images in the background are blurry, but my face is in focus. So you can control the focus of that camera. So you have more control. Once I found that I wanted to use that as my video camera or webcam, then you just Google, you know, webcam software, digital camera, SparkleCam came up. So I didn't know about it until I knew that I had to teach remotely. And then in SparkleCam, you can use Nikon or Canon cameras or generic cameras. They have different price points for what license you want to buy, what camera you're using, etc. But the SparkleCam also lets you do picture-in-picture, so you can have two video streams going simultaneously. So if you wanted to show, you know, something down here, you can do that. If you wanted to have, you know, demonstrate something and bring it up to the camera, so you can use it's just not static, one person, one image all the time. It's a little bit dynamic. And then BlueStacks I knew that there were emulators out there. So the Wise Cam has software for phones, Android and Mac. So that was just deciding which emulator to download and install. So the emulator is free. SparkleCam is a license fee for using that. And the device, the camera, is only $20.
Thanks for sharing all of this, Phil. And if you were able to, could you just type in the chat the name? Is it SparkleCam? We just want to make sure we have the spelling correct for everyone. Mary has written it down, but I'm not sure if it's correct.
Website link.
Thanks, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, for others here, this sounds like a good support. Is this something that, and maybe Lauren, as our representative from ATSS, is this something that ATSS can support instructors in getting set up with this kind of equipment to make their classes a little bit more dynamic?
I think what we can do today is take back to my group this kind of a scenario, and all the information that Phil has provided is so useful. So we can take that back and then have that conversation.
Right, great. Well, thanks for sparking that, Phil, because it does seem like useful support, especially if we need to go forward in doing more remote teaching for these classes. I wanted to go back to a concern that Andrew posted in the chat about how comfortable are we with students sharing their personal lives and living spaces. So Andrew, I'm not sure if you want to say anything more about that.
Sure. So my concern is I'm probably going to end up teaching photo online in the fall. And the concern is it's going to be about their personal lives and kind of ways they might not be comfortable with. So how do we address that? How do we make sure it's okay with them?
Does anybody have anything they'd like to share about that idea of, yeah, this is kind of an intrusion on everybody's space, right?
Well, yeah, so I can say a few words. I think, you know, clearly, Andrew, it's a great question. And I think that clearly it's got many different dimensions to it, right? I mean, it's the kind of imposition on our personal lives and personal spaces that is in many ways unprecedented. And even for those of us who may have had experience teleconferencing or using Zoom, et cetera, before all of this, it's just at a scale, I think, beyond anyone's you know, real experience. And I think from my point of view, you know, among those many dimensions that go into this question of privacy and sharing and personal lives, there's a spatial dimension to it, which I focus on because of my discipline, right? So what I've found is that many of the students that I'm working with, they're very conscious of, you know, this sort of thing, like what do you see behind me, or where am I sitting in order to like get the best light, and all of these things that they're kind of just taking for granted because they're used to asking these sorts of questions in their own work, their own design work. You know, they've gotten really creative with the virtual backgrounds. So they're plopping in things behind them that mask out anything that could be otherwise seen. But just looking at it spatially certainly doesn't address all of the dimensions that go into this question of sharing and personal privacy and personal lives. I'm just offering that perspective, you know, from my disciplinary perspective.
I'd like to just add that one of the related questions is the recording of the class sessions, the recording of videos in Zoom. That might be a concern for some students.
And it's with the recordings of the classroom, as you mentioned. That's where the real FERPA issues come in, and that is certainly well documented. And I'm looking around for the documentation that OIT worked with on ASR, and I'll share that.
And Phil just shared that he's using the webinar format. So right now we're using the meeting format, but he's using the webinar format. He's not recording the sessions. I'm just curious how many people are recording their sessions. You can raise your hand or use that reaction button or say something, whatever you choose. If you are using it, you can do a thumbs up.
I do occasionally, just if it's a demo. If I don't pre-record a demo, occasionally I'll do recordings, but I make it very known to them that this is happening.
Sure.
Deborah or Lauren, FERPA was mentioned, but I know that we were told that the Freedom of Information Act means that Zoom meetings are subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So does that include Zoom recorded classes, whether it's in the meeting format or the webinar format? That's kind of just a technical question.
Let's see, would you say that question one more time?
So our office was told that any meetings that we conduct through Zoom that could be requested by a journalist, for example, through the Freedom of Information Act. So that means if you don't want whatever you're discussing in a meeting to be subject to that, then you would not record it, although there might be other ways to get that information with a good hacker. But I just kind of wonder where that overlaps with FERPA and classes and whether or not that kind of applies. And then we've had people say you can always put your phone up and record something even if it's not officially recorded.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I bet that Walker has some good observations to make. I mean, there are certainly techniques that you can use in the Zoom environment, like when you are recording, like spotlighting a particular video so that the instructor and the speaker is being recorded and students are not. I think for the most part, as long as you are recording and sharing that recording in a protected environment, that's an accepted practice. So for instance, if we record this and shared it with students in the context of a Canvas class, and it's being shared with students, that's accepted practice. But this is a broad and complicated issue. And Walker, is anything you want to share with people? Any thoughts? I'm going to find that document to share with all of you.
So I'm just bringing these things up not because I want us to get all focused on this. It's just in the past I worked with someone who was a domestic abuse survivor. So there can be some real reasons why people don't want it known where they are, who they are, what they're doing, that type of thing. So it's just something that I think about sometimes now.
Yeah, students have the...
Why would you record the Zoom session of a class? I mean, what?
Sure, Phil. I
If
think
if you're not recording your normal class with a video and audio, why would you record the Zoom class?
I think as Lucas pointed out, he's doing it to record demos so that students can access those demos later. I know in my teaching, we actually use Zoom to facilitate speaking tests. So I'm recording for that purpose. I think there are different reasons people could, mostly for access afterwards. And I think right now, some people I think are choosing to record their classes because they know students might not be able to come to class at the time because, I mean, for example, I'm not working my normal schedule. I don't know if you can hear in the background a little chit chat from a small person. And so I'm not always able to go to meetings that I used to be able to go to when I was working in those blissful days when I went to campus and worked on it without disturbance. So I think that's another reason why now people are recording. It's just to give students another opportunity.
A lot of it, when I do it just for demos, because one of the things we've lost with e-learning is, I think the Chronicle of Higher Ed called it the hallway ask, which is like these kind of quick little like, couldn't remember how to do something, or, you know, if I'm working in my studio and a student comes up, I can't demo stuff to them just quickly again. So it's kind of I use it as a refresher occasionally, because setting up demos virtually is a lot of work and it takes a lot of time. So that's kind of what I use for that occasionally, is recording. So at least I can refresh things with it. And then if they need more clarification, then I'll talk with them.
So I do demos, software demos in Rhino, and I record the Rhino session. I like record the screen. I'm not recording the Zoom session. The only thing being recorded is what's on my laptop screen, Rhino, and my voice. I guess.
Yeah, that's what I do as well.
Okay.
And I think that's a great practice. I'm not sure that all instructors are maybe as savvy in being able to do that, at least at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
they're good questions.
My concern is if you're using the record through Zoom, it's recording everything, the visuals of every student that is sharing video and it just, I would agree with Anita that topic needs to be further discussed.
Absolutely. Okay. Sorry, I want to make sure I'm up on everything, all the questions in the chat. Am I missing anything here? No. Okay. Does anybody else have any concerns about teaching online? I think we're not going to be able to solve the concerns about Zoom and privacy at this point, but maybe Lauren, if you're able to share the documentation that OIT has. I saw that Mary suggested we could share that out when we share these notes as a resource, possibly something to put in the syllabi. But any other concerns about teaching, or that question, what do you need to let go of to teach your course online?
Alyssa, I did find something quick,
Okay.
and I put a link to it. And Lauren, I don't know if this is the same thing that you were referring to, but it is, there's a statement about recording and privacy considerations, and it says if you plan to record the session, you must have the student's consent. So yeah, there's a whole bunch. If you look at that link, you'll find some more information, and this is all about for the online environment.
Just one note, I did attend the Center for Spiritual Healing and Well-Being, the lecture from Celeste Headley. One of the things that she mentioned was just for your own well-being, not having your video present when you're talking. Like normally you don't hold up a mirror while you're talking in class to see yourself. Do I look good? Like there's something about seeing your image while you're talking that is disconcerting to the brain. So I don't know if there's a way to address not necessarily just the students, but our own well-being for the different ways that we're presenting ourselves to our students.
And Walker, I think you shared a resource about that recently with us in CEI, and I don't have it at my fingertips, but am I making that up?
You know, we have a rather compelling question in the Zoom chat from Robin.
Yes.
What will motivate students to even enroll in a studio class if it's completely online? Maybe many students will hold off until they can get access to the facilities. That's a really compelling question.
I'd be happy to speak. Anita, if I'm not interrupting you, I'm not sure if you had a...
I unmuted, go for it.
I thought that was a great question, Robin, and it's something I've actually been giving a lot of thought to. We meet with all of the students in the school weekly just to hear their concerns, and this is something that's actually come up. Students in the program are saying, well, maybe I need to take a year off while you all get this sorted out, and I'll come back when things are normal, if we ever do go back to that. And my view on it is actually that I think in some respects we probably need to recognize that things aren't going to go back completely to the way they were, and that some of what we're learning now to do with this new regime may actually become part of what we simply need to know how to do in life and in our profession. For the students in my program, after they graduate and they become professional architects, this may be what they need to know how to do. And so I think there still actually is a compelling motivation to say, all right, here is the environment in which we can test it out. Here is the place that we can learn how to make mistakes. Here's the place that we can learn how to communicate with each other, what works, what doesn't. In other words, it's the same set of questions that we've always been asking, but there's a new lens, there's a new framework, there's a new normal. We still have to learn how to navigate it, and I think it's still incumbent on us as educators to help our students navigate it. And so I would make the argument there's no better time to be in a studio course than right now. Do it and experience it and try to come to terms with it so that you are empowered in a deeper way after graduation. At least that's the argument that I'm making to my students. I think it's a fabulous question. I can't say that I've completely got a handle on what it means, but that's where I'm sitting right now on.
Yeah, and I would agree with Mike completely too. Is, you know, all of a sudden we now have time for self-reflection on our work, so to speak. I mean, obviously it's harder to focus currently right now with everything happening, but the kind of mentality, the get it done mentality, is starting to kind of dissolving a little bit in terms of getting a project done. Students can actually sit and meditate on their ideas and their projects, as well as, you know, I've told students, like, you don't want to lose your momentum, because just stopping your work is going to set you back. Getting back into that groove of being disciplined when creating work is going to be a lot harder if you take a year off.
What if it has the opposite effect? More students enroll because they don't have to travel. We don't know.
We don't know. You're absolutely right. We don't know. We're a lot of this is learning as we go.
Class sizes won't be limited by the room now.
That's true, and they don't necessarily need to be limited by international location. International students who want to study, you know, in the United States don't necessarily need to have a visa.
That would be something I would think we should be exploring. My wife works at a physical therapy clinic, and you know, her boss has been developing telehealth for a long time as a way to augment their current, you know, patients. And so this is an opportunity for them to hone that. And they think when this is all over that they'll actually end up as a net gain. They'll get more patients because of it.
So I would just like to share an assumption that I had coming into this session, which was that it would be easier to teach a digital studio course online than it would be to teach a tactile studio course online. And of course, now that assumption is wrong, but that might be an assumption that's floating in the heads of others. I don't know.
Agreed, Anita. I also have that assumption.
I mean, it's a really good question, and I think, again, I'm speaking from my own perspective, but it's drawn from my own experience. I'm not yet certain what it means to teach a digital studio. In times when I've been involved in studios which are focused on digital technology or designing virtual environments and so on, it's never been done with a sort of disregard to the spatial environment in which we're engaged in the learning and the conversation and so on. So I think it may or may not be easier. I actually don't know, but I think that what I need to keep in mind as I'm working with my faculty to develop and change courses is to say whatever it may be, it's necessarily different, precisely because that dimension of a shared spatial experience is in some way, you know, absent from our work. And so how we adapt to it, how we change the kinds of questions we ask, I think could all play into whether or not it's easier. It may well be. I'm not yet sure.
I'm not sure. I'm just thinking, Mike, my bachelor's degree is in landscape architecture. Mm-hmm. And so much of my education at that time was experiencing spaces, mm-hmm. right? And it was many moons ago, and mm-hmm. we weren't using a lot of CAD. I was still using the micro pens to do my hand drafting on vellum. Mm-hmm. But that said, thinking about going to digital, I think in my mind, part of it is that I maybe already in this experience right now, I'm assuming students have already had this experience of having those conversations spatially together as they have, because we haven't had to teach in a remote experience, but starting out an education online. And then kind of what you're talking about, how are we going to conceive of these spaces without first having this, what we had the luxury of this semester of having face-to-face classes and then moving to online. So what happens when we start remotely and then go forward? I don't know.
In the fall semester, I teach, every year I teach in the fall a course for about 250 college freshmen. So it's like, for many of them, it's the very first college class that they ever take. And it's our introduction to design fundamentals course. And so up until this point, it's always been taught in person. So if we're online or alternative in fall, that's a massive rethink. That's a massive rethink. It's not just as simple as putting lectures up on Canvas. There's something a lot deeper at play.
All right. I think we have time probably for one more question or concern to address as a group before we wrap up. We have just 5 minutes left.
I just want to offer some reflection on what I'm hearing today, which is absolutely profound. What everybody's comments and what they're contributing in terms of this quick shift to the online environment. But what I'm thinking about is how much we have to reshape how we present classes, and the expectations on the student changes as much as the expectation on the faculty or the instructor changes. And to me, I feel like there can be some very inspiring ways to do this. And we're already hearing about these. And then just on a side note, I mean, I didn't contribute a lot in terms of how much the libraries is contributing now, but I think the libraries can offer a lot of materials to help the faculty in preparing, whether it's demos, visual materials, research materials that are presented in a different way, and or helping the students figure out their research in the online environment. Thank you. Thanks to everybody. This was a fantastic discussion.
Thank you so much, Deborah. I want to share, Lauren suggested that I spotlight my video, which I've never done before. But in seeing my video, Lauren has told me that then in recording, it will only record me, because now you on the screen. So I learned something new. Thank you, Lauren. I need to figure out how not to see me though, because this is like, I've got the drain coming from that. So I'm going to share my screen in closing, because there's some information there for all of you. And then I don't have to see me. All right. So thank you everyone for coming and contributing, adding your questions, your thoughts to these ideas. Again, we'll be compiling notes, sharing them with the provost and the regents, and then putting them on the CEI website. We're asking everyone to please go to this link, z.umn.edu/virtual2, to give us some brief feedback on the session. And if you have any other information that you'd like to share, or questions that you weren't able to share during the session today, please do email me at rues0022@umn.edu. Anita and Mary and I are working as a team. We'll compile anything you send to me. We'll get that in our notes as well. Okay. So thank you so much. There's a way you can hide self-view. I just need to learn how to do it, Yulia. Thank you. I guess that's next on my, after this meeting. So the 3 dots next to my picture, it's this, the That's the key to everything, huh? Cancel the spotlight video. I don't want that anymore. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you are able to get outside and enjoy some of the nice weather. And see you
Thank you.
soon online.